Never play this game with your friends. Once there was a group of girls who heard about the game Baby Blue. They didn't believe in it but thought they could scare their friend Laura. So they sent Laura into a bathroom by herself. She turned off the lights, closed the door, and put her arms out as if to hold a baby. Then started chanting Baby Blue 13 times. What happened next cannot be explained. Laura felt a heavy weight in her arms. Then she felt the weight in her arms scratching her. She was terrified and didn't know what to do. She wanted to drop it, but she was afraid of what might happen if she did, so she froze, and the weight grew heavier and heavier. Suddenly, she saw a woman in the bathroom mirror with a twisted look on her face. She screamed in terror. When her friends heard her scream, they tried to open the door, but it was locked. When they finally opened the door, they found Laura on the floor. Her eyes had been scratched out. They tried to move her body, but they couldn't, because something large and invisible was pinning her to the ground.
This is the story of how I lost my virginity at my college campus, and it was one of my professors that took my virginity. This professor had a wife. Let's get right into it. This happened my freshman year in college, okay? A bitch just got there. If I'm being 100% honest, I never wanted to do the nasty because I was trying to save it for somebody special. After I graduated, baby, it was time for me to act up. And I most definitely acted up. Shit. So freshman year of college comes around. The first day of school and I walk into English class. I see this fine, sexy, tall glass of water. See this man sitting at this desk in the front of the classroom. This man was Liam Hemsworth on crack. This is Liam Hemsworth. Bitch, do the math. Class starts and he introduces himself as the professor. Like, really? I wanted this man to rail me. Anyways, as time went on, this professor and I began to become really close. Maybe a little too close. He would ask me to stay after class and we would literally just talk. It became a regular thing. We got so close that we exchanged phone numbers. So close to the point where one night he called me and invited me to his house. This is gonna be part 2 of how I lost my virginity to my college professor who was married. So like I said, he calls me one night and invites me to his house. He said we were getting along really well and that he never did this to any of his other students, but since me and him created such a special bond that I was an exception. So I was like, you're fine ass, sir, I will speed. Let me grab my keys. He gives me the address, I show up and he lets me in. We sit down and we just start talking about anything. He shows me around his house eventually. As he's showing me around his house, we get to some pictures on the wall. That's when I found out that he had a wife. Immediately no. Nothing else happened and I made an excuse to go home. He texts me and says that it sucks that I had to go home. He wishes we could have spent more time together. I told him that was most likely the last time we were going to spend together since he had a wife. Because I did give a fuck. At the moment. But things changed. Finding out he was married made me so uncomfortable that I stopped answering his calls and I stopped replying to his texts. I also skipped that class for a little bit because I just felt so awkward. One day the professor sends out an email saying that there was a mandatory meeting after school. I go to that meeting, but when I show up, me and my professor are the only people there. Like for part 3. This is gonna be part 4 of the time I lost my virginity by my college professor who was married. Like I said, me and my professor started taking pictures and taking videos whenever we would hook up. That would lead to our downfall. Mind you, he was the one who asked to start taking those pictures and recording those videos because he wanted it for when I wasn't around. We were doing all this and we were still walking by each other in class like nothing happened. Well, one day I'm sitting in his class as usual. Just a normal regular day. I never would have thought anything like this would have happened. But I guess it's my karma. We're sitting in class and we're learning about whatever the hell. We were going over some notes that a student had asked to go over because they didn't understand, but the professor was having a hard time trying to pull up these notes. His computer screen was connected to the big screen that all the students could see. I don't know what it's called, a smart board? Some electronic screen. It's a projector. I googled it. His computer screen is on the projector and he's opening up a bunch of documents and files. And next thing you know, he clicks a file and all the pictures and videos of me and the professor naked together shows up on the screen in front of everyone. This is going to be part 5 of the time I lost my virginity to my college professor who was married. Like I said, the professor clicks on the wrong file on his computer. All the pictures and videos of me and him hooking up showed up on the screen in front of the whole entire class. I'm sitting there like, I don't know who that is. That ain't me. It might look like me, but it ain't me. The entire class gasped all at once. It was like a harmony. And some students who sat next to me started to look at me. Like I said, I don't know who that girl that looks exactly like me on the screen is. I don't know who she is. Don't associate me with her. I don't know her. The professor's face goes red. He was frantically trying to take it off the screen. Like, it's too late. I put my hoodie up and I didn't know if I should leave the classroom or just stay in the classroom because not everybody realized that it was me. Like, some people in college don't pay attention to who's in their class. But the people that sat next to me knew that it was me. I didn't know if I should have stayed in class or if I should have left the classroom because if I left the classroom it would have looked guilty, but if I stayed in there it was just awkward. I decided to stay to avoid looking guilty. Once class was over and I went home, the entire school knew about me and the professor. This is gonna be part 6 of the time I lost my virginity to my college professor who was married. So like I said, I sat through the rest of the class after those pictures and videos were shown. It just would have been way more awkward if I just walked out right away. Like, it's already awkward. Let's try to avoid the awkwardness as much as we can right now. By the time I got home, everybody knew about me and the professor. Everybody at school was talking about it. What's worse is that somebody took a picture of the screen. That was evidence, and someone sent that to his wife. A lot of people were asking me about what happened, but I didn't tell them anything because I didn't have any friends at that school and nobody deserved to know my business. I had not been in contact with the professor ever since. He had blocked my number and I tried to email him, but he wasn't answering my emails. He also stopped holding class the day after that happened. But one day he did email me back. He said from there on out to stop contacting him, and so I did. The school kind of swept everything under the rug. He did in fact get fired. The school said that if anybody reposted that picture of the screen, they would get expelled. I dropped out of college. It was definitely not worth it. So here's just a little reminder to never sleep with your college professor.
Story time about why I beat up my best friend. So a little background information. Her and I had been best friends since we were in 7th grade. Her family was rich, mine was poor, and at first she was a really good friend. She was always there for me whenever I needed her. Until our freshman year of high school, which is when her and I started hanging out with boys. Now, my mom was kind of strict. She wouldn't really let me hang out with boys, but her mom was more lenient about her hanging out with boys. Every weekend, she would throw a party at her house, and she would throw them in her attic because 1, it was huge, and 2, her parents didn't give a fuck what she did up there. Anyways, she would always offer to do my hair and makeup before the party started, which always made me really excited because I never really put any work into my physical appearance. Well, little did I know, the only reason why she would offer to do my hair and makeup at these parties was so that way she could make me look like shit in front of all the boys. So after that, I taught myself how to do my own makeup and do my own hair, like for part 2. Part 2 about why I beat up my best friend. So like I said, I learned how to do my hair and makeup, and she went on vacation for like a month straight. Well, when she came home, she threw another party, and she was like, don't worry, after I'm done getting ready, I'll do your makeup and do your hair. And I was like, no, it's fine, I got it. She literally looks at me and she goes, are you sure? You don't really know how to do that. Like, it'll probably look really bad. And I'm like, why the fuck would you say that? She goes, no, like, I don't mean it to be rude. It's just that, like, I want you to look good in front of the boys and stuff like that. Like, sis tried to talk me into getting a shower for a full, like, 20 minutes. So after that, the whole night, she's literally being a pick-me girl. She's making all these comments about me in front of the boys, and I just keep brushing them off until her next party. We got ready, and I put on these expensive shoes that I had just bought, and she goes, wow, you just like really like to copy my style, don't you? So she starts making comments that whole night about how my family's poor and stuff like that, and she threw up all over my shoes. So I dumped the trash can that everybody had threw up in that night on her, punched her in the face, but like 2 months later, she came to my house and apologized.
Storytime about how I got caught hooking up with my stepson. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. It was sent to me on Instagram. My husband actually cheated on his wife with me. I started working at his company when I was 18. We started an affair and I knew it was wrong, but at the time I was very broke. He offered me a wealthy lifestyle and believe it or not, we fell in love. So when he and I got married, I was still 18. He was much older than me. He was 42. Everyone in town, of course, started hating me because I broke up the family. His wife couldn't even see my face. My husband already had 2 kids when we got married. One was 12, one was 15. So they were much closer in age to me than he was. The kids and I got along super well. I was their cool stepmom and we had a lot of fun. When I turned 20, the oldest boy came to live with us. And I think you already know what happens. My husband was always traveling for work. That means my stepson and I would be home alone most of the time. One night we decided to watch a movie, and before I knew it, we were making out on the couch. From then, we basically started an affair behind my husband's back. Part 2 is up. Part 2 about how I got caught hooking up with my stepson. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said, my husband was always traveling for work. So my stepson and I would be alone in the house a lot. One night we were watching a movie and it just happened. After that, we couldn't get enough of each other. He even started skipping class so that he could spend more time with me. We basically turned into boyfriend and girlfriend when my husband wasn't there. When my husband would come home from his work trips, we would pretend like everything was normal. One day after my husband got back from one of his work trips, he found one of his son's socks in our bed. He asked me how it got there, but I told him it probably got stuck in there while I was washing the sheets. A few months passed by and my stepson and I are still hooking up. This is when I realized that I hadn't gotten my period in a few months. My period was always irregular, so I didn't think anything of it. My stepson went to the pharmacy to get me a pregnancy test. It came out positive. But the big problem is that my husband can't have children anymore. How was I going to explain this to my husband when he couldn't have kids? Part 3 is up. Part 3 about how I got caught hooking up with my stepson. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My stepson and I take the pregnancy test and it turns out it was positive. Well, I told my stepson that his dad wasn't able to have kids anymore. That's when he really flipped out. Then he tells me we should just tell his dad the truth. I told him let's not do anything until we actually confirm that I'm pregnant. We go to the doctor the next day and it turns out I'm not pregnant. But this made me realize that we needed to end the affair. Once we got home, I told him we needed to break things off. He begged me not to and we went to his bedroom. Not even 2 minutes later, his mother walks in. She catches us on his bed. She nearly has a heart attack, calls his dad and tells him everything. She took him out of the house and told me never to see him again. When my husband came back from his trip, he made me promise not to see my stepson again. I told him we should get a divorce, but he said no. Then he confessed to me that he's been having an affair too. Now he doesn't even let me leave the house anymore. I want a divorce. What should I do?
Story time! This is how I got revenge on my sister for sleeping with my husband. If you haven't seen that story time, scroll down and go check it out. So before my ex-husband and I told our family that we were getting a divorce, I decided to throw a little party. Of course, he wasn't invited, but I told my family I had something very important to tell them. This was all the weekend before Easter. Yes, 2021. I told my sister that she had to be there because I had something very, very important to tell all of them. What my ex-husband didn't know is that I went through his phone and I found all her naked pictures. I went online and I bought a projector and I made a little movie with all of her pictures. Also screenshots of our conversation on Bumble. How fun. Well, the weekend came and I was regretting all of it. But as soon as she got to my house, she asked for my ex-husband. And I was like, oh hell no, this is not going to happen. I got drinks for all of my family. My parents were there, cousins, uncles, aunts, just everyone. Follow me for part 2. I got revenge on my sister for sleeping with my husband part 2. So like I said, I got a projector and I set it up right in the middle of my backyard because I had told everyone that it was movie night. Well, the time comes for movie night. Everyone gets comfortable, everyone has some popcorn, everyone has some drinks. The perfect setup. I named this little movie Our Love Story. As soon as the movie started, everyone was like, "Aw," but they didn't know that it was going to take a really dark turn. First slide was how we met on Bumble. Then all the naked pictures of her came up. Everyone was shook, no one moved. Then all her videos came up with my husband, when she was doggy style, missionary, every other position you could think of. Forgot to mention his mom and his sister was there, and my sister's husband. Close to the end of my little movie, everyone got up and was walking away. I told them, no. Stay and watch the end. Then the screenshots of the conversation came up, and just one last picture of them together. Thanks, sis.
Imagine TikTok being so powerful that they actually help you identify the person that almost murdered you. On my For You page the other day, I found this viral video that you guys might recognize, which states videos I took before almost being hunted and murdered. I clicked on her page, listened to her story, and was like, I have to know more. So I reached out and got the full thing. This is the case of Flowers Don't Growl. April 29th through April 30th of 2019, Taylor and her boyfriend Chris decided to take a trip to Falls Creek Falls, Tennessee. Taylor was 5 months pregnant at the time, so they figured they needed one last little trip before they were going to have a baby. And Taylor swore that Chris was going to propose. So that's why she documented so much of this trip, not even realizing that later on it was going to be used as evidence. So they set up at their assigned camping lot. They spent their time hiking, exploring, having fun. Taylor would collect flowers along the way to document it for memory's sake, but please keep these flowers in mind. And then on the second day, everyone from their assigned area was gone except for them. So they were more alone than before, or so they thought. Welcome back to part 2 of Flowers Don't Growl. So later in the night on their last day, they ended up hearing a loud crash. There's very windy roads nearby, so they figured that it was a wreck. And just to make sure kids weren't involved and that everyone was safe, they got out of their tent and ran over to the crash site, which was maybe half a mile away to go check on the people. The sheriff ends up showing up and it's like a DUI situation, but everyone ultimately was okay. So before heading back to their campsite, Taylor says she has to go use the restroom. So her and Chris walk over to the bathroom so she can do her thing, and in the distance they see a light flickering. And as it gets closer, they notice that someone is running with a flashlight. So they're both cracking jokes to each other like, oh my gosh, this guy really has to go to the bathroom. But once he approaches the restroom, he ends up stopping right at them instead of actually going into the bathroom. And states, and I quote, "Wow, you guys are fast." Creepy. Taylor notices that he has a weird smile on his face and feels really nauseous but just associates it with the pregnancy. So just to be nice, they continue to have a conversation with him, but ultimately this is where things go wrong. Part 3 on Flowers Don't Growl. So Chris and Taylor continue their weird interaction with this man. Chris explaining that they got to the wreck fast because they wanted to make sure everyone was okay. And the guy goes, yeah, I guess I'm just used to it. And Taylor's confused because like, used to what? Hikes? Car wrecks? They ask what he does, and he says he travels a lot and likes to go camping. And Taylor, starting to get very uncomfortable now, tells Chris that, hey, they need to go back to the campsite because the police will be over there waiting for their statements. Just trying to make an excuse to leave, and Chris could tell it was BS. And as they start to take steps back, he starts to take steps towards them, asking questions like, hey, how long are you guys going to be here for? And his hand kept playing with his hoodie pocket. Chris was starting to pick up on the message as they continued to walk backwards, while the man followed them forward. And then this guy decides to tell them a little story. He was like, car accident. It got me thinking this morning as I was hiking and I passed these flowers. I stopped because they were so beautiful and I heard a deep growl and it scared me. And it makes me think, you never know what day is going to be your last. That's when they saw the knife. Part 4 to Flowers Don't Growl. So this is when Taylor noticed the outline in his hoodie pocket was the shape of a knife. It completely clicked for her, and she told her husband that they needed to run. He looked at her like, what's going on? And she just states, flowers don't growl. So they took off running, and this is when he took off chasing them. And I'll show a map of where exactly they were chased. This is where Taylor and Chris ended up, and this is where they last saw the guy chasing them. And they made it all the way back to the crash site, and luckily the police were still there. They told them what happened and made a report. And 2 of the cops went out looking for him but couldn't find him anywhere, while the other officer accompanied them back to the campsite so that they could pack up their stuff and leave. They tried to get updated on their case later on, but never ever got an update. Having the baby and it being a couple years later, Taylor sits down and ends up making a TikTok. It goes viral and a bunch of people start to DM her with potential suspects. Taylor stopped looking at her DMs because it got so emotional, but one user that messaged her lived in the Falls Creek Falls area and had followed a particular case. She opened the DM and saw the man. This is James L. Jordan. Welcome to Flowers Don't Growl Part 5. So Taylor immediately recognized James L. Jordan as being the person that tried to attack her and her now husband that night. And horrifyingly enough, he ended up killing 2 weeks later, stabbing one female victim that did survive, but stabbing the male to death. The male victim ended up sending out an SOS last minute before he passed, and the police came to arrest Jordan. And honestly, one of the worst things was that he was not found guilty by reason of insanity. And Taylor has tried to reach out to police multiple times because he was very calm and collected the night that her and her husband survived. She has scoured all of her photos trying to figure out where he was at and found out that he was staying back here outside of the regular lots. Followers have pointed out things like this creepy shadow in this video, but ultimately we don't really know where he was at. But because of the story that he told about the flowers, she thinks that he had been stalking them for a while, watching her pick them. Taylor now is using her page to promote safety, learning how to protect yourself and carrying items such as mace or a taser, and campsites where you pay to camp probably should have security. Taylor is tagged below, so please go follow her to keep up with her story.
There's no way home, and I have no mercy. There's no way up, so I'm going down. Still I keep on living, so you pull me closer. When I have no mercy, let's carry on. No reasons to stop it. I wouldn't do it on my own, I can't deny it. Still trying to build and trying to be. When we